Shalom Jia, good morning. Thank you all for joining us here today. We're here today to talk about the threats that technology poses to privacy. Between social media, surveillance, and now the rise of AI, it seems hard to believe that technology can actually improve privacy, but our guest here today thinks that it can. I think nobody understands the importance of privacy more than Chelsea Manning, so I'm excited to hear more about your perspective and your work at NIM.
Sure.
And I want to start today talking about the buzzy elephant in the room, which is AI, either a dystopian hellscape or a very well done marketing stunt, depending on who you talk to. So, Chelsea, which is it? And do you think that AI actually does pose new threats to privacy?
Yeah, why can't it be both? I think that artificial intelligence is, because I come from, a lot of people don't know this, but my background is actually from data science and artificial intelligence originally. I did this for the Department of Defense for a number of years. I worked in the private sector, and before I started doing privacy projects more recently, I've been doing data science and AI projects like on the side as the side gig for the last few years. And I think that there are, I think that the hype is new, but the technology, the invasiveness of the technology, but also the potentials of this kind of technology are not new. I think that certainly a lot of the privacy problems that we're going to be seeing, that we have seen for the last 15 years, with algorithms like being used for search engines and things. We're going to continue to see these problems. But I also think that with the advent of large language models and large visual models, I think there's an immense amount of opportunity that comes with this kind of technology. And I think that it's a matter of how we as technologists utilize this technology, how we while we're developing these technologies, like how we train the data, like what training data we use, the limitations and understanding the limitations of what we can do ethically with this kind of technology I think are very important. It's very important how you implement this stuff, because as we're building these tools, we have to recognize that it's going to have an impact on a large number of people. I like to think of how a technologist very much fits within the role of having an enormous amount of impact on people, and yet we're not held to the same kind of ethical standards as people who are in different roles, like a doctor or a lawyer, who are obviously held by their own ethical standards. And I often like to think of like somebody who's working on AI, or somebody who's working on a data collection tool, or some kind of large-scale analysis on a group of people for an algorithm. That we're held to a different standard than say a surgeon, and I wouldn't want to go to a surgeon who has the mentality of break things and figure it out later.
Yeah, I mean, that leads me to my next question is, when we think about new technology like AI, obviously it's been around for a while, but you're seeing companies like Google and Microsoft adopt it much quicker.
Right.
Where does that burden of responsibility fall to develop this ethically? Is it with regulators? Is it with technologists? Is it with consumers themselves?
It's a mixture, but I think that technologists have the largest role in this. And the reason why I say that we have the largest role in this is because regulators are going to change. Like regulatory systems are going to change. So like for privacy issues, for instance, we've seen that a number of countries have adopted privacy regulations very similar to the GDPR in Europe, where you have a right to privacy, where you essentially have an inherent right to privacy. But we're already seeing that watered down. We're already seeing loopholes. We're already seeing sort of implementations where it's like, oh, well, you basically can't use this app, or you can't use this technology at all until you just click the accept button. And then the accept button, means that you've accepted all cookies and all kinds of tracking. So I think that it's implementing that technologists have a responsibility to say that this technology is not good, that it's going to cause potential harm. I think that we have a responsibility to withhold our knowledge and our technical capabilities. And I think that we have that people who work in AI, people who work in security, people who work in for algorithms and for these companies, we have an enormous amount of responsibility. And so We hold the largest amount of responsibility on our shoulders, and if we don't, then regulators are going to come and they're going to overreact, and they're going to have a they're going to regulate and perhaps in ways that are not constructive or helpful to the public.
Obviously, the challenge, if that responsibility falls to technologists, is that often their motive is profit and pure profit.
I disagree. I think that founders and companies have a tendency to have a profit motive whenever their company is structured in that way. But I don't necessarily think that I think that people gravitate towards technology because of the enormous amount of potential. Now, people have ended up either in the people who want to do public benefit usually end up in academia, or they end up in the public sector working for NGOs or for governments and under research grants like CERN in Switzerland. But I don't think I don't think it's technologists necessarily. I think that technologists end up working in business, but there are a number of methods now. I mean, like I look at public benefit companies, for instance, not the B Corp, but the regulatory framework where you essentially you essentially shield a company, or you shield this institution from being sued by shareholders, because I think that shareholders and the venture capitalists themselves are the ones who shift these very heavily towards a purely profit motive. I think that technologists have the ability to think more broadly, but it's just that it's very hard to work in an environment where, on the one hand, you might make 3 times as much working for a for-profit corporation.
So given that system that we do live in now, where technology is dominated by big corporations, I'm curious if you think that advancing privacy and technology as we currently experience it can be compatible, or how we can move toward that other future that you envision.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know how we move to that future. I think that we kind of just often with a lot of the stuff we're kind of just winging it, because we don't have the length of a storied history of having a professional field for very long. I posted on Blue Sky recently about how it seems like the job requirements for some positions, they expect you to work in a position for 4 to 5 years, but the technology of the tool that you're working on might only be a few months old. So we're in such a new environment, or a new time, that I think that we're moving. While we're moving fast and breaking things, we have to think about the consequences of what that means for people. And I don't know how institutions are supposed to address that with the sort of structuring that they have.
And then the other element, of course, is the consumer end, and convincing the public that privacy actually is important and is worth something to be enshrined. And I'm curious how you approach that.
I think they do understand. It's just that what choice do we have? What choice do we have as consumers whenever, in order for us to communicate with our friends, our family, we have to hit that accept button. In order for us to be able to shop, to be able to contribute in society, we have to provide something. And I'm a security researcher, and I'm a security expert, and I struggle in this area, because I need to contribute, and I need to be a part of, I need to be able to a part of this digital society, of course. And so I'm a poster, and I obviously have social media accounts, and I obviously purchase things off of apps. But yeah, I think that the consumer does understand, and I usually use real life, physical analogies. People often ask me, like, oh, well, if you're not worried about your data being collected or whatever, then just then you have nothing. You shouldn't be worried because you have nothing to hide. But the reality is that people close their blinds. You lock your door. You close your door. People want privacy. We inherently want privacy. And the fact that we're not getting this that we're not having our privacy, being protected in the digital space, is what, especially as we've gravitated, in many countries, we've sort of gravitated more and more into the online space after the 2020 pandemic, because we had, because of now we're in conference rooms. We're in sort of chat rooms. We're more on social media. We are sort of forced into this Zoom culture, this like remote work environment, or this remote learning environment in some places where we're not necessarily where we don't necessarily have a choice. Again, it comes to like, do we participate in this digital society or not? And it's harder and harder to say no. But the fact that we feel surveilled, the fact that we feel like our privacy is being violated, and the fact that we don't feel like we can close the blinds, that we can lock the door, is having a physical impact on us. And I really believe that it's making us feel more tired. It's making us, and I think it's actually having a long-term public health detriment to a large number of people. I feel like there's a physical, there's actual tangible things. I don't have data to back this up, but I strongly believe that if we do dig into the sort of medical effects of long-term exposure to this amount of surveillance, I think that it has a detriment on people's mental and physical health.
It also seems like an issue of accessibility where a lot of the platforms that we use are just popular for a number of reasons, whether from advertising or whether from a network effect. And I think of messaging platforms where WhatsApp is obviously ubiquitous. Signal is a much more private platform, but fewer people use it. So again, thinking practically, when those options are out there, how do you really convince people or shift those habits to encourage those types of platforms or technology?
Yeah, again, this lead, this is on technologists. This is on people to develop tools that are user-friendly. I often I've been thinking a lot about this more recently, about how user-hostile our application environments really have become with data collection, with ad collection. We've been sort of forced into this role, but I think that the second that a user-friendly application like Signal, where you don't need to know anything about encryption to protect yourself, right? You don't need to know anything about you don't need to know anything about like the back end or how this thing is structured. The second that that's made available and that gives you more privacy or more control over your data, then people just jump on it. They jump on that opportunity to be able to use something that's user friendly. So as long as the tool is user friendly, a good example of this I think is the sudden adoption by a number of posting and people in the posting environment, both in the English language and in the Portuguese space and in the Japanese space as well, for Blue Sky as a tool. It's currently in beta, but it is actually a cryptographically verifiable tool that while it looks and feels like Twitter and how it works, your data is protected in a way that has never been protected in any other social media tool. And I think that it's in this kind of environment where you're going to be able to really build. You're going to be able to build tools that people are going to want to use and that feel good to use.
Well, maybe the audience can come ask you for an invite code to Blue Sky after. I know they're very sought after.
Yeah, I've run out of invites, unfortunately. but Brazil has actually been a country that has widely adopted already. A number of people have been experimenting in the Portuguese language space. It's been quite fascinating to see that it's the United States, Brazil, and Japan, and to a much smaller extent, South Korea, that have adopted Blue Sky very early on. It's at only 50,000 users, but I think it holds a lot of promise.
I also want to talk about crypto because it's the beat that I cover.
Right.
Obviously, it's part of the startup that you work at. And
yeah,
I know,
I'm a skeptic, obviously.
You're a skeptic, and you're also an advocate of cryptography, not crypto, or putting the crypto back in cryptography.
So one of the things that I've been trying to encourage in the so-called Web3 or crypto space is a focus on cryptography, putting the cryptography back in crypto. So I think that tokenization of assets has been a focus area for about 8 years in the quote crypto space, because whenever I think of crypto, I actually incorporate cryptography in there, which is privacy tools like Signal and whatnot. But I think that I think it's unfortunate that crypto has sort of become about tokenized assets, things like Bitcoin, things like Ethereum, non-fungible tokens, utility tokens, stable coins, et cetera. I think that there's a much wider number of use cases for the underlying tools, the components of a blockchain, the components of cryptographic primitives, the components of elliptical curve, Diffie-Hellman computation, and public key infrastructure. I think that Merkle trees, Blue Sky is a tool that uses a Merkle tree. It is a cryptographic verification, but it isn't considered a crypto, right? It isn't considered like, because there's no asset, there's no tokenization of anything. So I think that there's a lot of promise in sort of using the parts of Web3 and crypto technologies, but to broaden the number of use cases, because I've always viewed Bitcoin in particular as a proof of concept towards something that will be bigger and more important later on down the line. And I feel like now that we're in the crypto winter, we can sort of start to companies and VCs can start to reassess and reevaluate, and not just think like, oh, what's the next thing? What's the next big thing? Oh, it's LLMs, right? It's ChatGPT, right?
And it's interesting, too, that Bitcoin and crypto first emerged as a privacy tool, but have become the opposite, where in a lot of ways they're more traceable than cash.
Well, I think that I think that verification of information is a very important tool and aspect of that. So I think that while it is from a privacy perspective, a blockchain or a ledger, is a detriment to is a potential detriment to your privacy if you're on this, unless you're doing something complicated like zero knowledge proofs. But I think that tools can be built to where you can verify that certain things, the nomenclature transaction happens, but that a photograph was taken, or a video was taken, or a meeting occurred, or a statement occurred, and you can go back and verify that later and have that be in a decentralized form. So I think that for especially because we live in such an information-rich environment where we are bombarded with an enormous amount of information every single day now, because we're so interconnected. We're no longer in this environment. Like I come from, I'm known for participating in a time where it was a secrecy versus transparency debate, but I feel like now we live in an environment, in an information environment where we're so awash in information that it's actually, is this information that I'm being fed, is it real, or is it misinformation? Is it disinformation? How do we verify these things? And I think that these cryptographic tools are going to be vital in terms of being able to help us know whether or not what we're dealing with is verified information, whether or not it's and to prevent sort of misinformation and disinformation in a time whenever AI algorithms and generative AI are going to be able to do things that are very convincing, that even all but the most skeptical people are going to believe upon first sight. But the one thing that the artificial intelligence tools can't bypass is cryptographic verification.
Do you think it's too late to change the values of technology and the internet and make it more about privacy and technology and less about this profit motive system that we currently live in? How do we shift that?
I mean, that's like saying, oh, is it too late for us to not adopt democracy? Is it too late? Like I feel like society is much more. I feel like the society online is just society, really, in general. And I feel like that cultural shifts happen, that seismic, that sort of paradigm shifts occur within communities all the time and within societies all the time. So I do think that this kind of shift can happen. Although it may require a series of unforeseen events to occur that push us in this direction. I think that it is not for now. I think that we're not locked in.
What are those events?
Oh well, that's
They're
unforeseen things.
But
Like that's the unforeseen part. Because we saw the rapid shift, essentially a 5 year, at least a 5 or 6 year leap in the adoption of online spaces with the 2020 and 2021 pandemic with COVID-19, because and that was very unexpected. It was a sort of black sheep event, right, or a black swan event. Sorry, not black sheep, but so an event like that, which is unforeseen, happens from time to time. I mean, think about this statistic for instance. 9% of people in broadband and wide broadband access countries had access who had access to online tools. Spent about 3 hours online, or they were quote unquote extremely online. They spent like scrolling on their screens on their mobile devices or at a computer, basically like participating in the online space for 3 hours. That jumped up by the end of 2021 to almost 30%. So that was 3 times as many people in only a year's time. So I think that paradigm shifts happen because of shifts throughout the broader society. Now, will it be something like the Russian invasion of Ukraine that causes a shift like this? Will it be a large data breach? Will it be a widespread international banking failure? I don't know, but something along that magnitude can certainly shift us in that direction.
All right, 30 seconds. Let's end on an optimistic note. What are you excited about right now in technology?
What am I excited about with technology? I think that we're in a very interesting time period, because I think that as the effects of the climate really start to impact people, and I think that and as sort of the last 20 or 30 years of technology sort of this sort of libertarian approach to technology that's been led by Silicon Valley, as we start to push back against that, and we start to, I think that as society more broadly starts to develop a resistance or a hesitancy towards just this move fast and break things approach, as it affects society, and as the climate change, and as climate change sort of pushes more and more of these changes and effects throughout society, I think that we are going to figure it out, and we're going to be able to build a more democratic internet and culture. And I think that we can end up with a society where we no longer feel like the internet or the online space is hostile to us or exhausting.
Well, we could talk about this all day, but unfortunately we're out of time. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us here today, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rio.